Get Rich Education is brought to you by Ridge Lending Group, Apartment Investor Mastery, Norado Real Estate, and Producers Wealth.
You're listening to the show that has created more passive income for people than nearly any show in the world. This is the powerful Get Rich Education.
Welcome to GRE, from Toledo, Belize to Toledo, Ohio, and across 188 nations worldwide. This is Get Rich Education. I'm Keith Weinhold. We need to talk about what really could be one of the most important issues of our time today. Now, we typically talk about providing residential housing in the United States here. And because shelter is an innate human need, and that need is still underserved in a lot of markets today, well, when you think about food, shelter, and safety, beginning with food, now let's pull back and look at the global picture, not just any one nation's picture. I know this sounds incomprehensible if you didn't already know it, but 200,000 more people are here on Earth today compared to how many there were just yesterday here on Earth. Yes, every single day we add 200,000 more people to the planet. And just imagine them all sitting down at a dinner table tonight. And none of them were there at the world dining table just yesterday. The Earth's population is expected to swell from 7.5 billion today, such that by the end of the century, we're expecting more than 11 billion people. So the innate need for human calories isn't just here to stay, it keeps growing fast and every day. And at the same time, in just the last 40 years, Earth has lost 1/3 of its arable land, and that fact alone is unfathomable to some people. Well, now it actually gets even more critical than that, because among this growing population and less arable land, humans are consuming more calories on a per capita basis. And as societies develop, they demand a higher quality calorie as well. So needless to say, demand for higher end and gourmet type of items is accelerating even faster than those average quality food items that we would call generic or commercial grade. Well, today we're talking about agricultural real estate investing, and particularly with two products, coffee and cacao. Cacao is the base product for chocolate. Both coffee and cacao are produced on small trees in Central America. And in both cases here, we're talking about high grade. Now, in coffee, the high grade term is specialty coffee, and it's become quite sophisticated. In fact, there's a 100-point coffee grading scale. Specialty coffee needs to score at least 80 points or higher. In cacao, the term for the higher end, varietals is fine flavored cacao. So rather than a milk chocolate bar, think about those bars with maybe 70 or 80% cacao content that come in a fancy wrapper with some gold-colored foil. Now, what about coffee? Can that really be considered a food? I'm not really sure, but it sure does have demand. Now, when you would get off a plane at the airport, even at the height of the Great Recession a decade ago, you would still see the long line at the coffee shop. That line wasn't any shorter, even in the face of the worst recession in 70 years. So the demand is durable. Now, coffee and cacao, they have a production advantage because they're non-perishable products. Just consider the inherent risk in the supply chain and the difficulty of producing grapes or lima beans or mangoes or really anything that's going to spoil. Now, I'm primarily a residential real estate investor. You probably are too. And a lot of my property is in the US where I live. On a global scale, there are some pretty good deals here. Now, on a basic level, I like that housing is real and has sustainable demand. Well, those same things can be said for agriculture. In fact, agriculture seems like a rather natural thing to invest in. Agriculture even predates modern housing. One interesting distinction, I think, is that your rental housing is typically owned and consumed in the same place. For example, if you own a Cleveland, Ohio rental house and your tenant lives there in Cleveland too, they're consuming that end product. But the difference is in agriculture, you might own coffee tree parcels in Panama or cacao parcels in Belize, but your end user might be consuming the product in California or the Netherlands. They're consuming it in a place other than where it's produced. Now, when it comes to a trusted team, over the last few years here, my relationship with this provider has really grown. And it's interesting with personal relationships or business relationships, they say that time will either promote you or expose you. And I think that it's promoted the provider here, and we're going to talk about that. I know that I've told you on the air before that I am an investor in this myself. Today's guest, the company founder that provides these agricultural opportunities, was with us here on 4 prior episodes, episodes 28, 60, which we did from the fringes of the coffee fields in Boquete, Panama, episode 125, and episode 157. It's been remarkable to see them grow over time, and they've really exceeded my expectations in both an industry influence perspective and just the size that they're growing. I have visited both places in person, Boquete, Panama, where they grow the coffee, and Punta Gorda, Belize, where they grow the cacao. And it's really been fascinating. Our guest joins us today from Boquete, Panama. Today's guest is the founder and managing director of a sustainable agriculture company called Agronosotros, and he's also the broker-owner of a RE/MAX real estate agency. He has a remarkably extensive business background with a focus on cash-flowing agricultural real estate in the region. He's a Canadian citizen, though he and his lovely wife, Deborah, have resided in Latin America for decades. And just personally, he is whom I have been investing with for cash-flowing agricultural real estate myself for nearly 4 years now, and his companies have really met or exceeded every expectation that I've had. Welcome back to Get Rich Education once again, David Sewell.
Thank you, Keith. Nice to be here.
Before we discuss how you've grown your business so substantially from the beginning, just as an overview, you offer parcels of specialty coffee trees in Panama and organic cacao trees in Belize, and both of these models are established so individual investors like us can buy 1/2 acre at a time, titled, and there's a low cost of entry, usually 20 to 25K per parcel, and people have bought as few as just one parcel or dozens. You're not going to get loans for these, and Americans can use IRA funds in a lot of cases, or cash, of course, and they get cash flow income not monthly, but annually, because it comes from the crop harvest and sale of coffee beans and cacao beans and their byproducts, and cacao, again, being that base product for chocolate. And importantly, they're professionally managed. You have turnkey farming operations and the bean processing and the trading and the manufacturing and the sales of the crop yield are all done for you. Is that pretty much a good overview of what you're doing?
I couldn't have said it better myself, Keith. Perfect.
And importantly, you have great fundamentals in place there. You have 3 pillars of sustainability: economic, environmental, and then social. David, on all your previous experiences, we talked about the coffee company ever since 2015. And then later on, you added the cacao company, the coffee company in Panama, the cacao company in Belize. And I could see the 2 sets of email addresses that you and your president, Darren, had. And this was just a lot to keep track of things. So what you've done is you've merged and you've made it easier to manage and just called it one company, Agronosotros. Tell us about that.
What we're doing is creating a company that will be very stable, that can grow internationally at quite a rapid pace, given that we have a lot of moving parts in coffee in Panama and cacao in Belize. We have governments to deal with different sets of rules and regulations. We have different products. We have different banking. We have all kinds of different labor laws, cultures and traditions that are important, languages, English, Spanish, everything in between. So we decided a year ago to spend 3 years forming Agronosotros so that we could build a team that can continue on to develop specialty agriculture internationally that provides deeded parcels to individual owners at reasonable prices with long-term sustainable cash flow. That's what we do. To combine both of the companies together under an umbrella called Agronosotros gives us lots of other flexibilities when it comes to staffing, operations, legal, human resources, financial, banking, accounting, all of the things that you need to consider in the delivery of any investment opportunity. Promising various returns, promising other things, moderately easy to do, but delivering on those promises takes a lot of work. That's why Agronosotros was put together.
Now we're talking about dirt. You as an investor have the opportunity to buy dirt. And like David said, you will get a deed for each parcel that you own. I have my deeds in my own name, for example. And where this all begins with you, David, is what you and your company do is you buy this land from somebody else and you divide them up into half-acre parcels and you bring in your team. You add your team, and that's everybody from management to soil scientists to laborers. Just tell us a bit more about the team because you've really grown that substantially in the past couple years.
Our agricultural team now encompasses both coffee in Panama and cacao in Belize, and it's admirably led by Andres Lopez, who is our farming general manager, our vice president in Agronosotros, responsible for all the farming operations. He has 40 people on his team in Panama, focused entirely on coffee, on the 10 coffee farms we currently manage and operate. We're just about to acquire the 11th. He has a team of approximately 30 people in Belize, managing 3 cacao farms there that are significantly larger each than a coffee farm is in Boquete, Panama. But they together, maybe 70, 75 people every day managing these farms from the finest detail of soil science all the way up to through the harvesting to the management of the native Indian people who are what we call recolectores, people who pick the cherries. It's a very detailed job, very hands-on. Everything is done in cacao and coffee by the tree. So it's specialty coffee and specialty cacao. It's not commercial product. It's a high value added product. We buy the farms. Most of them need to be, in a real estate term, rehabbed. We add capital. We add value in the rehab. We add management for the long term to an asset that is underperforming and undercapitalized generally when we acquire it. And that's what we do.
Sometimes you purchase these land parcels and there's already an existing farm there. And what you've done is you've kind of converted those crops a lot of times from just your general commercial coffee that might end up being produced in a cheap can on a grocery store as its end product. And you've come in and with your agronomy and your soil scientists, you've basically up-leveled that into higher-end specialty coffee, like you've mentioned. Or more commonly, I think these days what you're doing is you're purchasing raw land and then having your agronomy and your soil scientists begin anew with planting raw land. So just tell us a bit scientifically about what your agronomists and your soil scientists do to this land that had really just often been in a family farm or never farmed at all, so they never had that higher level knowledge to produce a better yielding crop.
That's very true. We have over the years segued into buying raw land more so than we buy underperforming commercial coffee farms.
Yeah.
We have a number of those in our portfolio, and they're being turned around over the 3 or 4 year period necessary to encourage Mother Nature to do something better than the farmer that we bought it from. But there's not that many coffee farms available in Boquete. This is a small area. There are a number of farms here, but they're being run by larger families, and they're not always available for sale. We pick off whenever we can a farm that meets the criteria. Criteria are very specific, if I want to put it that way, as to location and access and soil and wind and water and access and rain and the topography and a lot of other things that go into the design and the science of building a coffee farm or even a cacao farm from scratch. So cacao, we bought 3 pieces of raw land, so we built all the farms from scratch there. We've recently acquired raw land here for coffee farms in Panama, in Boquete, so that we can engineer the design of the farm. It's critical to be able to put the right varietal of coffee in the right place, on the correct side of the hill, facing whichever way. Some of them like wind and some of them like direct sun. Some don't like so much sun. Some don't like wind at all. There's contours, there's hills. It's a really cool process to watch Andres and his biologists and agronomists do their thing. The soil management is a very difficult process. It's an expensive process. It takes time, involves laboratories that are international in their scope, where you have to send soil samples to people who really know what they're doing, who do have a lot of specialized equipment. They charge a good buck for doing that, but it's a very valuable resource to us as we get further and further down in our coffee science and developing these farms. So there's a lot that goes into it.
So we're talking about bringing in degreed professionals, sophistication, formal training, and soil management into a region that's been pretty devoid of it. And just to give you a reminder that we are definitely not talking about residential real estate investing here. One practice that helps with providing more nutrients in the soil are having worms. So you even grow worms off in this one portion of one of your coffee parcel areas that you affectionately call the Worm Hotel, just to give you an idea of one of the more, I think, unusual and interesting things that you're doing there for this applied science.
We have millions of California red earthworms in this hotel. We lovingly call it the Hotel California. You can check in, but you can't check out. And Valentina, our staff biologist and value chain analyst, is responsible for all of that, loves it. These are her babies. They're producing an amazing soil that we can compost into these farms, but they also produce a liquid through the process of growing and multiplying very quickly. They process their food and it turns into a liquid, and that liquid is refined into a fertilizer that is sprayed on the trees, and it does wonders for the trees. I mean, it's all of the science and all of the stuff that goes into this is all sort of below the ground or off the radar for most people who invest in the deeded parcel that they can own in their own name or in their IRA's name or an entity if they so choose. That's just barely scratching the surface of what's going on here, and very interesting for people if we run 3 or 4 tours a year, show you all of these things, meet all the team, really understand what's going on, how to cup coffee and grade coffee, even down to the basics of how to make a good cup of coffee. 1,000 ways to ruin a good cup of coffee. All those things are available for anybody that's listening who wants to come, no charge. You get here, we'll take care of the rest. And we have dozens and dozens and dozens of people that come through that now know more about coffee than 90% of the population in the world put together, and it's a very interesting 3 or 4 days.
Yeah, it certainly is. I've been fortunate enough to be on both the Panama Coffee Tour, that was in late 2015, and then the Belizean Cacao Tour late last year, 2017. So it's really about applied science and the knowledge arbitrage that you're applying to the area there. And with one of those things, importantly, is when I was on the Panama Coffee Farm Tour in late 2015, I saw the site, and I stood right at the site with you where you're going to add a beneficio, which is sort of a coffee processing place. And the site was just a cleared rectangular area when you and I stood there a few years ago. But that beneficio has now been in operation. And see, what this enables you to do when you have this on-site handling of coffee beans is now you can have these value-added things for the more discriminating end consumer that'll pay that premium. And you can have single-sourced, traceable, value-added coffee that those more discriminating consumers want, and they can get a nice story on the back of their bag of coffee.
All part of the strategy, Keith, and you described it accurately, perfectly. The single origin, single estate, traceable specialty coffee that can charge ridiculous amounts of money for is the name of the game. And it really is. Being able to produce that coffee in your own coffee processing mill, or a beneficio in Spanish, is paramount to being able to provide that coffee to people who, like you describe, are very discerning coffee snobs who really do know their coffee. By producing that in micro lots of small amounts of coffee from a particular farm, a particular varietal, processed in 1 or 2 or 3 different fashions, all hand done, specialty, all picked cherry by cherry, really adds significant value to the coffee. And that's the name of the game. That's the business plan, that we take the raw land or the underperforming farm, finance the organization by subdividing it, selling the property to individual investors at a price that everybody can afford, then building it on the business plan and delivering on the business plan to the T, to everything we say we're going to do, we have done and will continue to do. We're just at the point now where we're going to distribute our third annual distribution for coffee, which will come out in the third quarter, as soon as we finish resting and selling the coffee that we harvested this year. And we're also at the stage now with the first annual distribution from cacao. And it will be the very first time we're going to produce an annual report in video. You're going to get to see, if you haven't been down yet, which is most people, you'll see everything that's going on over in Belize that has to do with the farming and the cacao trading and the nursery and the chocolate store and everything else, hands-on video right in front of your face. It's very cool and it's very interesting. And we'll do the same thing for coffee, this annual report too. So if you haven't been able to come, you're going to get the next best thing. But I strongly urge you, come on down here and visit us in Panama and Belize, because you'll really enjoy what you're doing. You'll meet a bunch of like-minded people, and you'll understand a lot more about what you're investing in.
Yeah, I really recommend those tours. If nothing else, it's just a part of a great, great vacation. Now, you as a residential real estate investor, I'm always telling you about how you want to think about how your tenant is thinking and what your tenant wants, because they are effectively your end consumer in residential real estate investing. But here in agricultural real estate, your end consumer really is that discriminating coffee shopper, whether you are that type of consumer or not. And I probably am one of those that are willing to pay more for a story on their bag of coffee. So whether you're one of those people or not, you just need to know that those people do exist, and there seem to be more and more of them. And part of this, David, let's just talk about cacao now for a moment. When you go on the cacao tour, you see the entire process. Your first field trip is to the cacao nursery, where you actually see the planting of the seeds, and you get to plant a seed yourself. And you're taken through the process all the way to where you have a finished bar. And a few months ago, David, I was surprised to get the email from you. As an investor, you're so communicative with the emails. When I saw that you have branded 2 new chocolate bars with the cacao that you sell there on your parcels. And they just had these really professional-looking wrappers that looked as good or better than any designed Hershey's wrapper or something. So just tell us about branding 2 new chocolate bars from your Belizean cacao.
We wanted to bring a product to the people in Belize that was actually Belizean and actually had their cacao in it. And as you accurately describe, it's not a Hershey's bar, or it's not a Lindt bar, and it's not made from cacao from Peru or Ecuador or Belgium. Doesn't even really exist, but it's got a brand name.
Right.
But it's made from Belizean cacao, and from farmers that live right in Punta Gorda in Toledo are actually growing this cacao. We're processing it into chocolate bars, truffles, pralines, bonbons, all the other things. We wanted to launch a couple bars to 2 different market segments in Belize. One was tourists that would come and actually take away something that was chocolate that actually was grown and processed and manufactured in Belize from Belizean cacao. And we've done that with the Belizean bar, and it's in distribution at the international airport currently, and in some stores that have a little bit more of a higher income clientele around the country, including the cruise ships terminals come in. Those are the people that we're targeting there. The other bar is called Bruckdown, which is a name familiar to Belizeans, which stands for a party. And so this bar is branded as a party in your mouth. And it's been created for the people of the country, where they can buy it in the gas station, in the grocery store, in the convenience store, anywhere they can get their hands on it, they can grab it. It's in 5 different pieces, so they can take a chunk off and put it in their mouth and fold it up and put it in their lunch pail, or put it wherever in their pocket, carry on through their day, where they can actually have something from their own country, made by Belizeans, from Belizean cacao, for Belizeans, high quality chocolate, not cutting any corners, 72% dark chocolate in the Belizean bar, 50% milk chocolate in the Bruckdown bar, branded for the people. And we've come out with a wholesale price that allows the retailers to keep the same margins they would keep on the other bars that they are selling, competing with us, but the other bars they're selling keep the same margin, and we're 30% cheaper than anybody else on the market. And that was our goal, was to get something in the hands of the people that they could afford.
Yeah, and again, that's really thinking about that end consumer. Well, what about you as an investor, and what about your cash flow, and what about the numbers behind this investment? We'll talk about that more when we come back. You're listening to Get Rich Education. I'm with David Sewell. I'm your host, Keith Weinhold.
Are you looking for a roadmap to financial freedom? If so, we have a solution for you. Norada Real Estate is offering a limited number of free strategy sessions to help you get out of the rat race. Learn how you can create wealth and build monthly passive income. To set up a time with one of our knowledgeable investment counselors, simply go to noradarealestate.com. That's NORADA realestate.com.
For an income property investor like you that needs an income property loan, go to Ridge Lending Group. And over the years, you've heard owner Chaley Ridge generously give her time to you right here on the show as a guest. Ridge provides investment property loans in almost every U.S. state, and you're going to find out how they've helped more Americans realize their dreams of financial freedom through real estate than any other mortgage lender in the entire nation when you get started at ridgelendinggroup.com. MC Laubscher is the host of the top-rated business and investing podcast, Cash Flow Ninja, and also the president of Producers Wealth. Producers Wealth assists people in creating, protecting, and perpetually multiplying wealth in any economy through creating processes that help them increase their production, provide them with liquidity, passive income generators, and opportunities for enormous growth. Learn more about their time-tested and proven systems at yourownbankingsystem.com.
This is Rich Dad Advisor Ken McElroy. Listen to Get Rich Education with Keith Weinhold, and don't quit your daydream.
Welcome back to Get Rich Education. We're talking with David Sewell about you investing in sustainable agricultural real estate, something that might appreciate over time. My parcels have since I bought, but they expect to deliver a cash flow to you, and that is from the crop harvest on an annual frequency, not a monthly frequency like you'd have in residential real estate. So let's talk about the cash flow, David. I think there are sort of some minuses and pluses. On the cash flow minus side, when you're purchasing brand new raw land parcels, it can take a few years for these trees to mature and produce a crop, especially when you need to do something like build your own saplings.
The patient side of cash flow is being in business with Mother Nature. We can't rush the process. We can only do what we can do in the time that it takes a coffee tree to produce its cherries. That takes around 3 years if you start from scratch. It simply is a patient investment. It is patient capital. It is Mother Nature producing top-notch coffee being assisted by our team and ourselves. So you need to understand that it's a patient investment, and it is a long-term investment. The cash flow is annual based on the harvest. We could put the cash flow out a couple of months early each year than we do, but we don't, because part of the process in managing specialty coffee is to age the coffee after it's been processed. We put it in a bodega or a warehouse for up to 3 months and let it rest in there, because it changes things, improves the profile of the coffee immensely, and improves the price that we can receive for the coffee. Other farmers don't do that. They sell everything in one batch at the farm gate for one price, put the cash in their pocket, sit on the rocking chair on the terrazza for the next 6 or 8 months, wait for nature to do their thing, and do it all over again. That is not us. This is a professionally managed specialty agricultural business, and that's why the time is involved. When the time comes, though, the cash flow becomes quick, and every year it's steady, it's reliable, it can grow as the farms are managed better each year and the management techniques take place. There's incremental growth in the cash flow, but it becomes very strong very quickly and stays around for a very, very long time. There really isn't any reason at all that you wouldn't consider this a legacy investment for your heirs, for yourself, then for your kids, and then for your kids' kids, because coffee has been around for 4,000 years. The management of the company is in place here. The financing of the company is in place here. We're not going anywhere. And we know how to grow coffee on a sustainable, perpetual basis that you can participate in on an annual basis just by opening the mailbox, more or less. But it's patient. 3 years minimum hold required by the contract, and that's only just to protect you from yourself. Because if you want to get into this on a shorter term basis than 3 years, we advise you not to do that. And in fact, we won't accept you if we find out that you want to do it in less than 3 years. You should be talking 5 to 7 at a minimum, and you really, really should be investing for the legacy part of this opportunity.
Annual cash flow is a pretty common frequency in agricultural real estate investing. And yeah, like David's saying, I guess on the minus side, it's a more patient dollar. Then on the plus side, I would say that the cash flows are more predictable than income property. And then you also have multiple revenue sources. You don't typically have that in residential, just from the standpoint of your unit is either occupied or it's vacant. It's either one or the other. But you have multiple revenue sources when you sell cacao and when you sell coffee. You're going to have a buyer for it almost certainly, but sometimes you might have a buyer that pays an even higher price.
Or even in residential real estate, the worst case is it's occupied and nobody's paying the rent. That's even worse.
That is the worst. That is physical occupancy with economic vacancy.
Exactly. So our tenants are trees. They know what to do. They don't move out in the middle of the night. They don't not pay the rent. They don't take our furniture with them. They're trees. So you can translate tenants, toilets, termites, and troubles into trees and participate in the sustainable agricultural business of nature being prodded along by our professional team with a patient outlook to the investment. It's perfect for IRA money, by the way.
Now, independent of any appreciation that might take place in the land, tell us about the cash flow ROI that an investor can expect over time.
To reiterate that point, we do not include in our IRR or internal rate of return, or if you're not familiar with that term, the average yield or the average annual interest rate. If you want to break it down into common terms, we don't include at all any value for the increase in the land. We're pretty sure that if you buy a piece of raw land, we turn it into a specialty coffee farm, and 7 years later it's cash flowing in double-digit numbers and will continue forever. You own that land. It's going to have a capital value considerably higher than what you paid. But we don't include that at all. So I leave it at zero in the forecast because I'm pretty sure we can make zero. And I don't have to worry about anything else happening. Conservative forecasting. The cash flows are based on the amount of coffee or cacao we grow, the price we can get for that cacao in the market or that coffee in the market, keeping in mind it's specialty price, so it's expensive coffee. So we don't need to sell a lot of coffee. We're not in the billions of tons business. Here we're in the hundreds of thousands of tons business with micro lots that are very specially targeted, rifle shot targeting to specific people who are coming here and ordering the coffee and are testing it in our laboratory and ordering a year in advance. It's occasions for what they want for next year. That fine-tuning, conservatively forecast, will produce a return of somewhere in the order of 11% annually. Could be 12, could be 10, probably 11, and that doesn't include the value of the land, and it includes a fairly conservative approach towards the forecasting, which is my style. So we can deliver that.
Now, I am not a tax professional, but United States citizens can expect to report and pay tax on the cash flow income. That's just for United States tax. But Panama and Belize, they don't have any additional tax that you would need to pay on your cash flow. And David, these days, a lot of kind of residential and turnkey income property in the United States have waiting lists for interested people that want to buy a property. How are you looking for acreage available right now?
We're taking all comers. Anybody that wants a parcel, we have parcels available for them. In developing farms, we have some parcels available at the moment in farms we've already planted, so they're a little closer down to the cash flow than they would have been a while back. There's a few of those available. A few other new raw development farms available. We're acquiring another farm as we speak, so there's plenty of coffee farm parcels available there. Price is currently $18,000 a parcel, plus a 5% fee for transfer taxes, which goes 100% to the Panamanian government to pay their costs to create the deed and transfer the property. In cacao, we have parcels available as well. They're $24,500 currently, plus the same 5% transfer tax that we have to pay to the Belizean government. They're available too. I think we have 25 or 30 cacao parcels available in one current farm, and we probably will release one of the other farms to the community of investors that are listening today over the next few months. So there's always something available for you.
Now, some people ask a question about, well, what about the market? These are commodities like coffee and cacao that trade out there on the open market. In fact, coffee is the second most traded commodity in the world. It's second only to oil. So sometimes investors think, oh, well, now can I check the price there? Does that relate to my investment at all? What do you tell them?
The coffee price that you see on the crawler across the bottom of CNBC or Bloomberg or whoever you watch has got nothing to do with our coffee. That's commercial coffee grown in Africa and other places in huge, huge quantities. Colombia, Robusta varietals mainly, some Arabica, which is the higher quality coffee. But it has nothing to do with the specialty coffee business. The specialty coffee business and the specialty cacao business is a supply and demand oriented business based on very limited supply of coffee or cacao and a very high demand for the product. So the pricing is very flexible. We have nothing to do with the commercial market for coffee or cacao. You can look on the screen today and see coffee at $1.17 a pound. Our coffee sells for $4, $5, $8, $18, $28, $40 a pound wholesale, depending on the quantity of the coffee we have available and the varietal of coffee and how it's prepared. So there's a lot of margin in specialty coffee. Cacao, for example, if you check at the CME or some other exchange, look at cacao, you'll see a figure of around $1,800 a ton. Our lowest price cacao sells for $6,400 a ton, $6,400 a ton. And in small quantities where smaller cacao chocolate makers are buying 1 ton, 2 tons, we can get as much as $13,000 a ton out of them on smaller quantities. So there's a lot of high margin product going on here.
Well, if this sounds interesting to you as a prospective investor, I really recommend you opt in for the report so you can just slowly read this through and look at the pro forma rates of return and just learn more about the investment pros and the investment risks. And then after you opt in for that report, you can either look into purchase some parcels or go on one of their great tours. Now, I purchased my parcels more than a year before I ever went on the tour. They offer 3 tours a year, every 4 months for Panama coffee, and then also 3 tours a year, one every 4 months for Belizean cacao. So these tours are always coming up, and I think you're going to find it really interesting. And one of my takeaways from my tour was just topographically, the actual parcels that I own are at a steeper gradient. Those are my coffee farms. They're on a slope because this stuff in the specialty form is typically higher altitude and it's shade grown and your crops are mixed in with big trees. So it's not maybe quite like you're seeing it in your mind's eye. And on the Belizean cacao tour, you truly go through the life cycle of Belizean cacao, from seed to sapling to tree to pod and even to processing and fermenting, and then finally to a bar. It really is just some of the more interesting real estate touring I have ever done. The best way for you to get started on that is to opt in for the report to learn more and connect with the provider that way. For coffee, you can do that at getricheducation.com/coffee. And then for cacao, yes, it is getricheducation.com/cacao. David Sewell, thanks so much for coming back onto the show.
I really enjoyed the time.
Yeah, well, it really all starts with a great team here. When you become a real estate investor, you may very well become a collector of real estate. And when you get the realization that owning your own collection in diverse geographies and diverse use types hedges your risk, you start to see how this might fit in. So with this, in one fell swoop, you are an international real estate investor. It's not a fund. Your name is on the deed, and at the same time, you own producing agricultural land. The United States is a pretty big, broad place, but as a collector of diverse real estate, consider that there are 200 nations in the world, and it makes increasing sense to be invested in something real in more than just one nation out of 200. Now, you can buy an acre of farmland for less than what David talked about. You could go elsewhere and do that. But of course, you're not just buying farmland here. You get more than the dirt. Your crops have the use and the operation of facilities, from bean processing facilities to a cupping and grading laboratory, and all of the labor and expertise like biologists and agronomists and soil scientists and a value chain analyst, farmers and laborers. And a few years ago, I used to think of this provider as a boutique type of operation, but with the way that they're adding employees and expertise and expanding their footprint, I just don't think of them that way anymore. You know something? Years ago, I thought that my first international investment might have been in Mexico, I guess just because it is closer, but I soon learned that they're harder to deal with there on many levels. And Mexico is really kind of the opposite of a tax haven with more onerous tax than the U.S. Now, you're probably only 1 or 2 time zones from Belize in Panama, or you might even be in the same time zone. Now, most people participate in this opportunity sight unseen before they see the parcels. I know that a lot of you have visited Panama and Belize and been on their tours already. I really suggest going on one of their educational field trips. They really treat you well with complimentary meals and ground transportation and excursions, and you can do that whether you're an investor or not. I bought my parcels more than a year before I ever actually got on the ground and visited them. If you go visit the Panama coffee farms, I suggest setting aside at least 2 extra days to see Panama City and the Panama Canal if you like. It just makes for such a grand trip that way. But you're going to find the weather more pleasant and agreeable once you get up into the Panamanian highlands, where they grow the coffee in Boquete, where it's cooler. Now, who would this opportunity not be for? It is not for you if you're 100% devoted to putting every one of your dollars into getting out of the rat race in, say, 18 months. But, really any long-term buy and hold real estate probably would not fit you then. And I think David made that pretty clear. And people in their 20s all the way up to their 70s participate. David mentioned that it's a legacy investment. Some people will even buy it and just put it right in their child or grandchild's name. In fact, I've said before that it is probably the only real estate I own anywhere in the world that I have no plans to sell, and I would buy it again. When you're thinking about investing, you might as well start from the ground up. Literally, that's just what farming is. Well, next week, the inventor of the 401k retirement savings plan, Ted Bennett, will be here with us. Then after that, we're going to talk more about today's rental housing market trends. And later, we're going to have an everyday listener like you join us on an upcoming episode. He's from Michigan, so he can tell us how putting get-rich education ideas into practice has changed his life. Well, today with agricultural real estate investing, we probably touched on at least a few things that you found thought-provoking and would want to know more about. We are Get Rich Education, so we're education first. And if you find the opportunities interesting, then I highly encourage you to check out the Coffee and Cacao investor reports at getricheducation.com/coffee or getricheducation.com/chocolate. Until next week, I'm Keith Weinhold. Don't quit your daydream.
Nothing on this show should be considered specific, personal, or professional advice. Please consult an appropriate tax, legal, real estate, financial, or business professional for individualized advice. Opinions of guests are their own. Information is not guaranteed. All investment strategies have the potential for profit or loss. The host is operating on behalf of Get Rich Education, LLC exclusively.
If you want to retire in 5 years or less through real estate investing, then pay close attention as I'm about to share my proven recipe with you. This is Brad Sumrock, and I've taught thousands of people just like you how to replace their incomes, quit their jobs, or simply have more income and freedom than they ever thought possible. And we do this by investing in apartment buildings. After starting with no experience, I managed to pocket over $1 million in cash and retire from my 17-year corporate job after only 3 years of apartment investing. and I have hundreds of successful students that have had similar results. If you want to get out of the rat race or simply have more income and freedom in your life, then investing in apartment buildings might be the answer for you. Visit our website at bradsumrock.com to get more information about our upcoming training events. That's bradsumrock.com.
The preceding program was brought to you by your home for wealth building, GetRichEducation.com.